In 1936, along a dry creek bed in Texas, a couple stumbled onto something that still sparks arguments today: a hammer fused solid inside a chunk of rock. Not resting beside it, not sitting on top, locked inside it, like it had grown there. Some claim the rock is millions of years old, which would make this ordinary-looking tool a scientific impossibility. Geologists strongly disagree. But the object is still on display today, and people are still asking the same question. The story begins near the small town of London, Texas, where a couple named Max Hahn and Emma Zadie Hahn were out walking along the course of Red Creek. It was 1936, deep in the Texas countryside, far from any laboratory or university. They weren't looking for anything unusual, just passing the time along the water. What they noticed next would end up outliving them both in local legend. Half buried near the creek, the Hahns spotted a strange piece of loose rock with a sliver of wood sticking out of it. It wasn't obviously valuable or dramatic, just an odd little curiosity worth picking up. They took it home, likely thinking little more of it than a conversation piece. For about 10 years, that's exactly all it was: a rock on a shelf. A decade later, the Hahn's son Max did something nobody in the family expected. He cracked the rock open. Inside wasn't just more stone. It was a solid iron hammerhead, still attached to a fragment of its original wooden handle, sealed inside the rock like a fossil. What had been sitting on a shelf as a curiosity was suddenly a mystery nobody in the family could explain. The hammerhead itself was surprisingly small, about 6 inches long, with a diameter of roughly 1 inch. That size suggests it wasn't built for heavy-duty labor like construction or blacksmithing. Instead, its scale hints at fine, detailed work or handling soft metal. In other words, this wasn't a giant's tool. It looked like something a skilled worker would carry in a toolbox, not a relic from a lost civilization. When the metal was analyzed, the composition came back as 96.6% iron, 2.6% chlorine, and 0.74% sulfur. To some, that chemical mix sounded exotic enough to fuel speculation about impossible age or unknown origin. To metallurgists, it's a fairly unremarkable reading for an old iron tool exposed to certain mineral-rich environments over time. The numbers alone didn't prove anything, but they gave the story fuel. Here's where the mystery starts to lose some of its shine. Tool experts have pointed out that the hammer is stylistically identical to mining hammers manufactured in the late 19th century. Not similar, identical in design, size, and shape to tools common in that exact region during that exact era. That timeline lines up perfectly with ordinary American mining history, not ancient history. For decades, the hammer sat mostly forgotten, until 1983, when it was purchased by Baugh, a creationist who saw something much bigger in it. Baugh didn't just call it interesting. He called it a monumental pre-flood discovery, suggesting the hammer predated Noah's flood entirely. Under his ownership, a rusty mining tool was rebranded as physical evidence for an entirely different version of Earth's history. Baugh went even further, using the hammer to support a theory about the ancient atmosphere. He proposed that Earth's pre-flood atmosphere may have supported unusually large living things, including giants, and treated the hammer as a clue toward proving it. It's a striking claim, but one built on speculation, not verified in mainstream science. The hammer had become less about the object and more about the story wrapped around it. Baugh's Creation Evidence Museum began promoting the object under a new name, the London Artifact. It became a centerpiece exhibit, drawing visitors curious about an object positioned as evidence against mainstream geology and evolution. For many guests, seeing a hammer supposedly trapped in ancient rock was a powerful, tangible experience. No lab report required to feel the mystery. But geologists and skeptics pushed back hard, and the pushback centers on one simple fact: rocks like this don't need millions of years to form. The hammer sits inside a limey rock concretion, and concretions like this can form startlingly fast under the right conditions. If that's true, the entire foundation of the ancient artifact claim collapses. The leading explanation involves a mineral called travertine, a highly soluble limestone deposit that can harden around an object relatively quickly, not over eons. This is the same basic process behind so-called petrifying wells, where objects dipped into mineral-rich water become encrusted with stone in a matter of weeks or months. Under the right chemical conditions, nature can make something look ancient almost overnight. That single detail changes everything. A hammer coated in a hardening mineral doesn't need to be prehistoric. It just needs the right water, the right minerals, and the right amount of time, which could be decades, not eons. Suddenly, a 19th-century mining tool sitting in a creek for a few years becomes entirely plausible as the source of the impossible rock casing. And yet, despite this explanation being widely accepted among geologists, the hammer was never scientifically dated in a way that fully settled the debate for everyone. No definitive lab test on the surrounding rock has closed the case for all sides. That gap between plausible explanation and total certainty is exactly the space where legends like this keep breathing. The London hammer isn't alone in this category. It belongs to a broader group of objects skeptics call out-of-place artifacts, items that seem to contradict known timelines until closer examination usually reveals a much more grounded story. These artifacts persist in public fascination not because science can't explain them, but because mystery is simply more exciting than a straightforward answer. What makes the London hammer so compelling isn't really the iron or the rock. It's the tension it creates between belief and evidence. To some, it's proof that history is far stranger than textbooks admit. To geologists, it's a case study in how quickly nature can create the illusion of age. Both sides are looking at the exact same object and seeing two completely different worlds. Today, the hammer remains on display, still drawing visitors who want to see it for themselves, some hoping to witness proof of a lost world, others simply curious about a very old-looking argument. It's a small, unassuming object to have caused this much debate. But maybe that's exactly why it still works. A 6-inch tool, asking a question science says it has already answered. So was the London hammer a miner's dropped tool, slowly encased by fast-forming minerals? Or something science still can't fully explain? The evidence leans heavily toward the ordinary explanation, but the story refuses to die quietly. If mysteries like this fascinate you, subscribe, because wait, what? Digs into the strangest artifacts history has left behind, one impossible object at a time.